I should give that a try. And then last, we have some school-wide initiatives that we do at WAMS. The Media Center hosts a lot of events. We do the Global Read Aloud. It's an opportunity for kids to come down during their lunch period, and for about 6 weeks, a different teacher every lunch period is reading a book out loud. It's the same book every day. They give a little summary at the beginning if the kids missed a day, and it's completely voluntary. Anyone who wants to come down and read the book can do so. And it's the same text kind of across this program, so it's a good way to kind of create a reading community across other schools as well. We also do a March Madness where the kids vote on the books that they like to get a winner in the bracket. Their favorite book is revealed at the very end, and every afternoon they kind of announce the winner for that week or that day. We also have something new this year, Read Woke, across America. It's basically an initiative to have kids read books that can help them empathize with a different person's experience. So instead of reading a book just about a kid that's just like them, kind of looking at new perspectives, the Media Center has this great display of a ton of books. And actually this morning on the PA system, they're doing, throughout this time, they're giving a book recommendation in the morning announcements, and giving a little book summary about it. And another great thing that Ms. Crandon started this year, every teacher has this whiteboard kind of poster outside their door telling what they are currently reading. And I think it's cool for kids, you know, obviously the English teacher has something to read, but their Spanish teacher's reading a book, and their math teacher's reading a book. And I think it's just a great way to kind of normalize reading instead of making it something that you have to do. All right, that's it for middle school. I'll pass it off to the high school.
Hello. So 2 years ago, when Emily, Nick, and I were on maternity leave with our second children, we attended a professional development workshop at the College of New Jersey, hosted by 3 Bernardsville English teachers about revamping summer reading. So Emily and I were very interested because over the course of teaching for 12 plus years at the high school, we recognized that our summer reading program had a few issues. So we were eager to attend and see what type of program they offered at Bernardsville and how we can take ownership over that and make it our own.
So some of the issues that we were seeing with the summer reading is they affected students and they affected teachers alike, and families also. Students were just not reading. They weren't interested in the book. They checked out before they even gave anything a try. We also found that some students were skimming or only reading for whatever assignment they had to do. So if they had to answer a few questions, they didn't bother reading the whole book. They just read as much as they needed to. In terms of overall academics, students new to the district and any students moving between levels, so for example, a student deciding that honors wasn't for them and moving to the CP level, the books were different. So then they were lost because by the time they had made the level change or come to the school, it was really punitive to say then that a student had to read an entire book in this abbreviated time. Increased parental pressure. My mom always said that summer reading was her worst nightmare. And my mom was an English major. But making me and my brother sit down and read the books, and then having the pressure of August and everything else that comes with that, she just never liked it. As somebody who was always a reader, she wanted to get rid of that. Go ahead.
Okay, so with the summer reading essay, usually the first time or process piece in all of the grade levels, regardless of CP honors or AP, was some sort of essay assessment based on the summer reading. And one of the challenges that we discovered is when we were scoring these essays, it's difficult to tell if students need help with writing because they're lacking certain skills in writing, or if students aren't reading the books and then are trying to manufacture an essay out of something that they hadn't actually read. So that was something that we had talked about as a department as one of the biggest obstacles that we encountered with the first assessment of the year, and how it's difficult for us to learn about students as readers and writers if we're not sure if they're not reading the book or if they really just need help with some of their writing skills. We also recognize that the summer reading options really limited students' free choice. So if at the elementary level and the middle school level, the teachers are trying to cultivate this environment of choice and independent choice, we recognize that our former summer reading program really limited the amount of free choice that students had to pick books. There's also the lack of interest and motivation. So teachers were primarily the ones, either collectively or independently, depending on which course it was, who were selecting these books. So students weren't feeling that they had a sense of buy-in or a voice with picking the books that they were reading over the summer.
And then finally, this lack of ownership by students and parents, because we found that a lot of people had the same frustrations that the members of our department did. So as a department, we sat down last February and decided that we needed to come up with a common vision for our summer reading in order to implement some of the things that Ms. Quimby and I had found out from the Bernard's teachers, but also to ensure success and some cohesiveness between the grade levels.
So when we sat down and we said, okay, what is the goal for summer reading? Is it just to keep kids reading? And are we less concerned that they're reading titles that are tied directly to the curriculum? And are we more concerned with them reading simply for the sake of finding pleasure in reading? And all of our department sat down and we generated a list of what we feel is our vision as a high school English department for summer reading. And the first is curricular ties. We can't completely abandon curricular connection between summer reading and coursework, or else there would be a major disconnect at the beginning of the year. The second one is vocabulary acquisition. And I would say, I teach AP Lang and Honors World Lit at the high school. One of the #1 questions that I'm asked on back to school night by parents is, how can my child develop a more expansive vocabulary? And my response is, they have to be readers. There are studies that have been done that show you have to see a word 14 times before it becomes part of your vernacular. So the more that you're reading, the more vocabulary you're acquiring. Flashcards, Quizlet will only take you so far. So really acquiring vocab comes primarily out of independent reading.
We also decided that we needed students to build stamina. So at the other levels, we've seen the role that technology has played, and a lot of our students we see are only reading short pieces of things before they decide that they don't like it or they're not interested and they move on. They're reading articles online, which is fine, we're all there, but there is a certain...
Kindergarten will recess, will be inside today for kindergarten, and we'll let you know that's following the rest of the grade level. Thank you.
There is something to be said about reading stamina. As Mr. Hunter was saying, regardless of what fields these students plan to go into, and we're a little bit closer at our level, but they're going to need to be able to read varied texts and get through them, keep going. Cultivating empathy, which we see at other levels too, looking at the characters and who they are as people and the conflicts that they're going through, building lifelong readers, and avoiding that summer slide, where students learn things junior year and then they get to an AP course, a CP course, an honors course senior year, and a lot of those fundamentals are gone.
Okay, so why do we like this? Now, granted, Bernardsville has about half of the number of teachers in their department and half the number of students that we have at Ridge High School. So when Mrs. Lipnick and I sat down, we said, how are we going to make this happen? And last year, especially, in such a short amount of time. And so we prioritized what we liked about this and how we can harness all of the aspects of this project that we like and get it off the ground and running in just 2 months, basically. So one is that it offers more student choice. So students would be part of the process in selecting the books, and they would also be the ones voting on the books, narrowing it down in that March Madness style way to 4 books that every student in the school, regardless of grade or level, is choosing from. The second is that it encourages school spirit. So when we get to talk about how we assess students on this, because incoming 9th graders all the way through 12th graders are reading one of the same book, one of the top 4 choices, it encourages a sense of collegiality and positive peer pressure among all students, regardless of grade and level.
It meets the district goals that have been laid out. It avoids issues with the new to district and level changes because everybody would be choosing from the same book. So even if you had intended to do honors or AP and had moved levels, the book would have been the same. So we don't have that problem with the essays at the beginning of the year. Generating excitement to hopefully engage and motivate students, which goes hand in hand with the student choice. Streamlining the beginning of the year assessments, because then everybody can work together, can do things, we can mix grades and mix levels, and create interdisciplinary connections, because one of our goals in getting the first list of books up is diversity, and that's in topic as well as some other things.
So what does this process actually look like? So we as a department decided that we need to divide and conquer. And one of the ways to do that is to create subcommittees. So we generated a survey that we sent out to our department members asking which subcommittee would you like to be a part of. The first process in this is finding and vetting titles. So this is one of the committees that I happen to co-chair, and it is an extensive process. This year, because we had a longer time frame, we began the process much earlier. But basically this committee is comprised of language arts teachers of all grade levels and all levels, CP, honors, and AP. Special education teachers, the media specialists. Last year we had a counselor on it, and students who are all part of the selection process. And basically we start off with a massive list that's usually culled from our Goodreads of things that we've read over the course of the year, and students, things that they've read and nominated for the committee. And we comprise our list of criteria. What are we looking for? We're looking for 16 fiction, 16 nonfiction titles of equitable authorship of male and female that show a wide range of diversity of race, ethnicity, religion, things of that sort. And we want to have multi-genres and multi-modes to really appeal to the vast audience that we're trying to cater this to. From our massive list, we get down to 32, and that's where our 16 fiction and 16 nonfiction come in. We also, as part of our consideration, consider the availability. So while some of our titles are chosen from New York Times bestsellers, the most popular YA books of the last year, we have to consider that some of those are only available in hardcover. So really, we try to make sure that students have access to it digitally if they like audiobooks or prefer to read on an e-reader, softcover and hardcover, just to give them a wide range of availability. Also, in terms of where they're available, we had a hard time finding some titles on Amazon or at a local library, so that really became part of the process. Are we going to put something on there that students don't have access to? And the answer is no. We want to ensure that it's available at the local library, all of the branches, the media centers, and then bookstores or Amazon, of course.
So after they have their list, they pass their list of 32 titles on to the QR committee, which this year was one person, one of our special ed teachers who also teaches English. She made these, it's hard to see from here, but for each book there's a picture of the cover and a QR code. So the students passing these displays in the hall can go and use their phones to scan the code, which will then take them to a summary of the book. So we actually see students stopping all the time. This particular bracket setup is at a main intersection in the hallway, and then the other one is outside of the cafeteria. So then once we have those QR codes, we make the brackets. We put up, last year we did 2 displays, this year we decided that we only, or last year we did 3 displays, this year we decided that we only needed 2 displays. And then we go to marketing and trying to really build that excitement and that energy. Some of the things that we are doing right now, because this is the first week of voting, so by the end of the week we will go from 32 to 16 titles. We had students pose with holding the books, and their pictures were all put into a slideshow, and that's been running on the TVs around the school. So people see their friends, they see other teachers that they know in this slideshow, and that's a cool thing for them. One of the members is putting together a book tasting in the media center, whereby people can take their entire class, and then the classes can hold the books, see the books. Length is always a consideration, so they don't want to pick a book that's 400 pages if they're not a really good reader or an interested reader.
So just to qualify that, we were very nervous about putting Unbroken on our list last year, even though it's of high interest, because it is close to 600 pages. And Unbroken ended up being one of the top 4 books and one of the most widely read books, regardless of grade or level. So while page number is a consideration, it's not necessarily a deterrent for us either.
Definitely not. But having that time to see the book, read the back, look at the author, you know, the picture on the, we don't want to judge a book by a cover, but sometimes we do. So the book tasting, this is the first year we're doing that, so we'll see how it goes. That's going to be held next week with 16 titles. Yeah.
Okay. So this week, starting this week, it's the first week of voting. So we have a separate subcommittee, and they draft the surveys using Google Forms that are approved, meaning they go through it and check to make sure that there are no errors or glitches. And then all of the teachers give them in class. So because this is the biggest round of all 32 titles, we have a week or 4 days to complete it. So from Monday to Thursday is the first round of voting this week. Next week, jumping off the heels of the book tasting, will be the second round of voting, and it will also be a time frame. And then the third round, where we go from 8 to 4 titles, everybody will do it in one day to ensure that we get the most number of students voting. After that, we will have our final 4, which we will reveal. Last year we did it at our department meeting, and I'm assuming we will do the same. And then it will go live to the students. The last committee that meets, again, is a pretty big committee because it has teachers and special ed teachers on it from all grades and levels, is the coordinating and designing assessments. And this is, how are we going to gauge the level of interest in the books, whether or not they've read, and get to know all of these students as students in our class, and also just students that are part of the Ridge High School community. So we decided on a school-wide discussion day, and it runs one day, and it is everybody. It happens during all of the language arts classes, and it is facilitated by senior AP and Honors World Lit students. And in those groups, for all of the titles, you have student facilitators, and then you have students of every grade and level from resource room all the way through 12th grade AP discussing on one day. So we sat down and said, how are we going to assess their performance? And number 1 is it has to be formative. Because if we're trying to build this culture of readers, we can't assign or have students assume that there's going to be a penalty if they're not contributing. So while they have a rubric that they can either self-assess, or some teachers did peer assessment or teacher assessment, it has to be low stakes for the first assessment of the year so that they get their feet wet, especially the incoming 9th graders who are really hesitant to contribute maybe in front of their peers who are 11th through 12th grade.
So that last committee also decides what the required titles will be per level. So for example, for, talk about AP Lang.
So AP and Honors will have a second required book. And because part of our district initiative is social and emotional learning, we really wanted to figure out how we could reduce the amount of stress that students feel towards summer assignments, and especially the amount of stress that they feel toward reading. So the first is we need to lower the number of books students are reading, and that will hopefully increase the engagement and would encourage students to go out and seek more independent options on their own. So at the AP and the Honors level for 11th and 12th grade, they have a second required book. So that is something that has a strong curricular tie or a foundational text for the course.
In terms of assessment and differentiation also, we did post an optional graphic organizer that students could use to prep for the discussion. So a freshman who might be a little bit shy, especially once they realize that they're going to be in discussions with juniors and seniors, might want to prep a little bit more beyond just annotations in the book. But again, we tried to pare that down so that it didn't interfere with the enjoyment of the reading. So this optional graphic organizer, but we asked them to keep notes about their favorite quotes. And then really just, why did you like that quote? Did you connect with the character? Did it remind you of another memory you had? So we found that in terms of the discussions, that really started things off, and the discussions in every room, depending on the title, went in all different directions. And then, so we have the school-wide discussion, but that's the only thing that every single class does. And then depending on the class, the level, the grade, they will be doing other assessments also.
To go back to the graphic organizer really quick, I love teaching juniors and seniors because they're honest, almost to a fault sometimes, but I appreciate that honesty. So when I ask them about independent reading or reading in the classroom, they say it would be nice if we didn't have required annotations, because sometimes it removes the joy from reading, or you're stopping to always add a post-it or something. So while we as English teachers recognize the importance of writing things down when you're reading and making marginal notes, we realize that our expectations are slightly different for summer reading because we want it to be a pleasurable experience. And that's why the graphic organizer is an optional assignment. If kids feel a strong compulsion to have their ideas organized, then they can do it. They could also use whatever note-taking method they prefer for this assignment. But we really wanted to increase the pleasurability that's associated with summer reading and make it less of a, I have to do this, I'm checking off all of the items on this checklist.
Here is the main entrance set up for the books. Monitoring and adjusting. So during the course of the discussions this year, we did keep a live Google Doc so that every teacher could log in and record what was going on in his or her classroom. Then we were able to debrief at the October department meeting in terms of teacher observations. One of the best things that we learned was that kids did not get up to these discussions to the bathroom. And as a high school teacher, let me tell you that the number of bathroom trips during one of my normal classes is a lot. It's high. So to have not one student in 90 periods of the day asked to leave the room says something about their engagement in the discussion.
What we also realized after going through the subcommittee process is that subcommittees, some of them needed more, some of them needed fewer members on them. So finding and vetting, because it's a lot of reading in a short amount of time, we added more, and part of our goal this year was to add more students as part of the committee, and we did. Across any of the classrooms, you could find teachers on that committee just, tossing books to students, asking who was interested in reading or previewing it, and they are so excited to be part of the initial process, to feel like their voice is being heard, that kids were at random picking up books from classrooms, from the media center, from the public library, downloading them just to be part of the process. We also increased the timeline this year. So last year we didn't start the process until February. We ended up running into some issues with voting in April because of spring break and state testing. So this year we started the process in November with finding and vetting titles, and we will have a true March Madness this year because we'll know the final 4 titles at the end of the month.
Just a side note about the students pitching in. Ms. Quimby and I, when we were doing the brackets in the main entrance, a student stopped and said that he was going to help us. And then he started giving us ideas, like, well, maybe you could have different colored push pins for the different genres. And the whole time he's helping us, I'm thinking he's her student. And then I hear her ask his name. It's just a random student that stopped to help us out and had some ideas. So kids are really getting into it, which is nice to see.
So after we ran the school-wide discussions, we asked for student feedback, and we asked for anonymous feedback. And this is pulled from a Google form, so we know that it's a lot, but we tried to go through and bold some of the key items in here that really stood out to us. The fact that students were able to choose the book added to the level of enjoyment. Students found themselves debating the actions of the characters in one of the titles cited. They also felt that it made them mentally stronger or better equipped them to deal with issues in everyday life and reading about these individuals' obstacles.
This person talked about not just their book, but the selection of books was good because he was interested in reading many of them. The themes keep coming back, what it means to never quit, and the fact that it was motivational. And then the assignment, allowing them to focus more on the reading and the enjoyment of reading than just getting an assignment done. Feeling connected to characters on a personal level goes back to that idea of cultivating empathy, and students feeling sadness with the character and the sadness that the book was over.
They felt that it worked well in trying to connect varying grade levels into discussion. So when I initially told my honors world lit students that they'd be facilitating discussions, they did say, I'm not sure how this is going to go with people of varying levels and grades. And this is a senior response reflecting back on how deep of an impact it had, knowing that students across grade levels and across different leveling of courses were able to connect with one another in this one-day event. And then they said that they felt that connections between characters or in the nonfiction-based individuals' lives really resonated with them and empowered them to go out and make certain decisions. The entire class, so depending on how many students were in some of the discussions, we ran smaller groups or 2 larger groups, really illuminated connections that students had or that they made individually. They recognized that other students made those connections as well. So it was really fostering a healthy environment to be free and open with discussion of these texts.
And then finally, that last part, deepen my appreciation for reading, is why we're all here. So we're all going to go through now at the various levels what can be done at home to foster this culture of reading. So this comes from all of the high school teachers in our department collectively, but you can take a family trip to the library or the bookstore. As we heard before, kids are not too old. They might be interested to go with you, look at books together. Still, you can read to and along with your child, setting that time aside, making time to discuss the important concepts in the book.
Yep. Encourage questioning and discussion strategies, so asking your children what they liked about the book, what they didn't like about the book, encouraging them that it's okay to abandon books when they're not appealing to you, because there are so many books out there to be read that there's not enough time, there's too much time for us to waste spending books that we don't always enjoy reading when we pick independent reading books. Practicing visualization and vocab acquisition, showing and modeling that when you encounter a word that you're unfamiliar with in a text, that it's important to stop and look that word up. And then making reading a priority at home. So students often know and they recognize the distraction with technology. So encouraging a power down period where everybody as a family puts electronics aside and everybody is reading at once. Allowing people to read for a certain period of time really encourages that reading is a priority in this house.
And setting goals, helping your students break the reading down into manageable chunks, because not everybody is intrinsically motivated to read. Not everybody is going to be totally interested. And so if we can say, okay, well, we're going to sit down, we're just all going to read 1 chapter, or we're going to read half a chapter, we're going to read 10 pages, that would help. And everything here is encouraging intellectual curiosity. So encourage them to go online. There's so much out there that can connect to these books. Interviews, author information, TED Talks.
And I'll just be quick, same thing with the library. I think middle schoolers love to kind of get their own library card if you haven't already. Donating books to your teachers, your child's teachers' classroom libraries is always appreciated. And I think the biggest thing is just modeling good reading habits for your kids. Don't just tell them to read. Read a book on your own. If they see you doing it, they're going to be more likely to do it too. And another one is partner, don't probe. So instead of grilling your kid on the themes of the book and tell me which vocab word, tell me what this means, leave that to us to assess and kind of dig a little deeper there. Just ask them what they like. Read the same book as them. Make it fun for them at home.
And really, most of them have been said, but we just wanted to kind of leave you with 3. And we also thought this graphic was just, kind of made me, when I looked at it, I was like, oh wow, sometimes, as I said earlier, we think about them being little when we're reading to them, but in looking at this graphic, really children enjoy being read to. When they asked children ages 6 to 17, 83 of them enjoy being read to aloud at home. And then down at the bottom, 40% of ages 6 to 11 wish that it had continued. because it stops. So our biggest thing that we want to kind of take away, to try to drive home some of the same points that were said by our colleagues, is that one, going to the library, going to the bookstore, making it a priority, making the time, and continue to read with your children.
What a great note to end on. So creating that culture of reading, as we said, those 3 building blocks: time, access, and then both parents and teachers modeling that value of reading and engaging our children in the act of reading. So would you please join me in giving our teachers a round of applause? Now I know we have hungry little ones coming.
Yes, you have really about 2 minutes, so.
That's time for 2 really fantastic questions. Is there anything that we can answer for you, or things that you're wondering about? I know you've had a long meeting this morning. Yes, please.
More serial specific, but do we think we might be able to bring the bistro back when we were talking about?
We have a date set. Yes, due to the library change last year.
Right, oh, yeah.
But we do. It is May 17th, which I believe is a Thursday night, working on my memory. But we will be bringing it back.
Right.
Yes.
And I know other schools also have family reading nights of different kinds as well. So if you're from another elementary school, we should have that as well. Good question. Thank you so much for your time.
That was great timing. Thank you very much, everybody, and it's available online for you to tell other folks about it. And
And it'll be on the scoop page.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
This very important topic, creating a culture of readers. And I think that's, it's a very important topic, especially for the parent-teacher organization, because it's something where, it's something that extends beyond the classroom, and it's really a place where parents and teachers can partner together. And we know that any time that we can strengthen the connection between home and school, that just improves outcomes for kids. So with me today are teachers at every level of our program. We have Kelly Winkler and Gabby Cavagnero, reading specialists right here at Cedar Hill School. They are the literacy specialists of the building, and they work K through 5. We have Melissa Conlon from William Ann Middle School, an English teacher. Erica Crandon. Oh, I think I need Mrs. Euler. Erica Crandon, whose name you can't see right now, couldn't be with us today. She broke her ankle, but she's also another William Ann Middle School teacher. And then we also have Janine Quimby and Emily Lipnick from Ridge High School. And it's really important for you to hear from the teachers, hear from the practitioners that are working with kids day in and day out as we work to create this culture of reading. And I'm really excited for you to hear about the great things that our teachers are doing to do this. So, our path is threefold. We'll talk about the why, the how, and the what. So we'll talk about why creating a culture of reading matters, why it matters for your child. You'll hear about how our teachers work with kids in school to create that culture of reading. And then lastly, we'll end with what are some ways that you can create that culture of reading at home, and how can we extend this beyond the school walls. So that's our path. So let's dive right in. So why does reading matter? Why does creating a culture of reading matter for our kids? One of the literacy experts that we refer to a lot, his name is Kelly Gallagher. He's well-researched, well-published. He's also a practitioner. And so he lists for his students that he teaches year in and year out a list of reading reasons, you know, for those kids who say, well, why read? I'm going into finance. Or, you know, why read? I'm going to do something other than English. And so he lists a whole host of reasons. And you can see that not only building knowledge and vocabulary, but also building your moral compass and your ability to empathize with those that have a different experience than you do. Reading makes you a better thinker, a better expresser, and it helps you beyond school, whether you're going to college or in your career, being a good reader leads to success in all disciplines. And having that independent reading life is critical to really being a lifelong learner. So you might ask, well, what are the expectations, for kids? We are a public school, so how does this relate to the expectations that the state has for us? And so, as the curriculum supervisor, I can't help but give you a curriculum standard. I'm sorry. So this is one of the key standards that's in every grade level, kindergarten through 12th grade. And it's really the exit goal for reading. So by the time that kids graduate with a high school diploma, we want them to be able to pick up anything, read it well, read it with proficient understanding, and make meaning of it. And we want them to be able to do that independently. And so the curriculum that we have in place, we talk with kids about strategies, and we have structures in place, and we give them time for practice to develop this skill. And I have to say, having been here since 2004, hearing kids come back from college saying, I didn't major in English, but my writing course, I was able to handle it with ease. Whereas other kids sitting in the college seat next to me, were struggling. And I was able to handle any text that my professor threw at me in engineering class or whatever it is. So we have a program that does this well. But if we really want to do what's best for our kids, we can't just stop at the standard. We have to really work to build this culture, this community of readers. And that's really what the focus is for this presentation. So there have been a bunch of studies about reading volume. So if you look at, the best readers, what are they doing? What are the habits of the best readers, the most proficient readers, those that are the most successful? And a whole bunch of studies say that, in order to be a proficient reader, those that grow the most in reading, they are habitual independent readers, they're reading above and beyond, and they also spend time reading. And so this other graph that I have, sort of shows the balance, right? The number of hours that kids spend in school versus outside of school. And so if we are to, build this culture of reading, it really does have to extend beyond English class. And it has to extend in the home as well. So when thinking about a culture of reading, we really do have to think about time as a key challenge in creating that culture. So, as a thumbnail sketch, sort of summarizing decades of research and millions of research articles, I wanted to give you sort of a sense of what we know about reading and how that relates to creating a culture of reading in our community. So, we know that reading is important. We know that the most proficient readers are those that are reading beyond what's assigned. They're independent readers. We know that being a proficient reader enhances success in all disciplines. There was one study that correlated science achievement scores with number of books in the home. Now I don't know that one causes the other, but I thought it was an interesting correlation. We know that time spent on reading matters. And we also know that the 40 minutes at the high school, for reading, the time spent reading has to extend beyond reading class. But we also know, and this is a national study that was done for, I think it's the National Endowment of the Arts, did a study that said nationwide, for years and years, starting at around age 10, age 11, kids choose not to read in their free time. Only about 27% of kids choose to read in their free time. And I think that's indicative of, the age of distraction that we're in, the demands on all that kids are expected to do to create that college portfolio. So how are we to create a culture of reading? When we know that reading is important, it leads to success. We know that time's an issue, but we also know that there's a national trend of children choosing not to read, choosing rather to play video games or interact with peers or engage in sports, that kind of thing. So what I tried to do was sum up the challenges. I'll give you 4 challenges and 3 building blocks. So 4 challenges to creating a culture of reading. One is time. How do we create that time for kids beyond the school day? Another challenge that we have is access. Kids need access to books, not just at home, but also at school. They need to be in a text-rich environment, and they need to have access to high-interest texts from a variety of genres and topics and authors, digital as well as print, so they need access. We also know that a challenge is engagement. If we have a national study that shows that nationally kids don't choose to read, does that have to be the case locally? And I think the answer is no. But we have to shift that motivation from extrinsic motivation, I'm doing it because, you know, my teacher tells me to, or my parent tells me to that intrinsic motivation. We know that choice and interest, especially as we get into the adolescent years, are really important in terms of engaging kids in developing an independent reading life. And then the last challenge is, of course, attention. How do we get kids' attention? Not only having a time to read, but if they're reading in an environment that's noisy, or if they're reading on their phones where they're constantly getting notifications that's interrupting their attention, that's a challenge to creating this this culture of reading. But it's not an insurmountable challenge, and you'll hear about ways that we are working towards building that culture. So 3 challenges that we have to think about when we're creating a culture of reading. From 4 challenges, let's go to 3 building blocks. So in order to create this culture of reading, we know that our children need access at home and at school to texts. One of the most successful students that I ever taught here, she went to Yale. I asked her mother, "What'd you do?" She's the most gifted reader I've ever read. And she said that, well, my vehicle was called the Bookmobile. Everywhere I carted my kids, I just had a ton of books in there, and so as we were commuting to soccer practice or whatever, I provided my kids a text-rich environment in my Volvo. You know, so that's one way that one parent chose to, you know, increase her children's access to text. We know that our children need a time and a place to read, a place that is free of distraction, or where the distractions are as limited as possible. And they also need adults. They need teachers and parents who model that value of reading and who talk to their kids about reading. So these are 3 building blocks as we're looking to build this, this culture of reading. So now let's hear from teachers at each level. We'll go from elementary school to middle school to high school, and then we'll come back and we'll end at Cedar Hill as well. So let's hear from Kelly Winkler and Kevin Cabinero about what is happening at the elementary level in terms of creating a culture of reading. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. So on this slide, we're going to talk about how reading workshop really is how we present reading throughout the district, but as the elementary level, we really are the ones teaching them to read as well. So as you look at this pie chart, you can kind of see that the most time during reading workshop is devoted to independent reading. And in that time, it's not just independent reading, but that's also the time when teachers are working in groups, they're doing guided reading, there could be book clubs going on at that time. And throughout the grades from K to 5, that independent time will look different because our kindergartners aren't going to be able to come in and sustain, 30 or 40 minutes of independent reading, but they do still learn, even at that level, how it is important to have that time devoted to that, to have the attention to focus on a book. And then we gradually build that throughout all of the grades. And that first blue section, that mini lesson time, that's really the teacher time with the entire class. So that's when they're giving explicit instruction. They're modeling for the student what they want them to do when they're reading independently, so that during the independent time, they can then practice that. But as you see, most of that time is that independent reading time. And the way we can kind of hit some of the challenges that Mr. Hunter mentioned during independent reading is through all of the classroom libraries that we work to establish in all of the classrooms, so that the children have a wealth of books, tons of books at all different types of genres, so that they will find something that they're interested in. Because as he said, if they have access to the books that they're interested in, then they're more interested in and want to read in that engagement, or have them engaged in that reading. Also during that time, that's when we can do read-alouds, so that teachers are modeling the importance. All the way up into 5th grade, we do read-alouds, because that's important that the students see their teachers, obviously, as readers as well, but they get to share that love of reading with them, and then they're also learning more about the books and how the authors have written as well. A minute, sorry, you don't have enough hands to hold all of these things. Some of the advantages to reading workshop. So again, time is something that's important that was mentioned, but having that time in school, when you have that increased time of independent reading during reading workshop, that's helping to build that reading stamina so that when they are at home, they can have that extra time. They know what that looks like because that's being modeled in the classroom. They know that the classroom is quiet. It's just, it might be just the teacher kind of either conferencing with the student one-on-one or having a small group. But they know what that looks like in the classroom, so then they can kind of emulate that when they're at home, so they have that quiet, sustained time. They know what it means to sit and have your attention focused on a book for a sustained period of time. Building the reading community, as I mentioned, with books in the classroom, students, teachers talking about books, all the book fairs that we have as well, where teachers are signing up for the wish list and then getting to share those books. I know teachers do that all the time when they get the donations from the parents that they're so grateful for, and sharing those books, and hey, and everyone's so excited and putting the books on display. All of that excitement. Again, you're getting that engagement, you're getting modeling for students so that we're building that reading culture. Student choice, that comes back to the classroom libraries, again, having lots of choice. We also have that with our book clubs that we do, even starting in 1st grade in our reading workshop. Having the children have an opportunity to pick different books to read and then discuss within their club, having that interest, so that we're not just assigning the books, really making sure that they have that buy-in. We want them to be interested in reading those books. The predictability of reading workshop is also important. They understand what the routine is, they know what's expected of them. There's chances to check in with each student through conferences, guided reading, even if they're doing some post-itting or stopping and jot along the way. That's all predictability, that's all holding them accountable, helping them to have their attention there while they're reading for that sustained period of time. On this graphic, this is something just what I was trying to get you to kind of think about this for a little bit. That independent reading, this is really text levels, but during independent reading time, they should be reading at an independent level because that means they're reading on their own and understanding that book. That instructional level is that time with the teacher during guided reading. And then there's also text that would be considered frustrational for our students. So if you look at this chart, in your mind, you have to total 100. For each line, ask yourself, what percentage should students be reading independently, an independent text? At what percentage should students be reading at an instructional text, and what percentage do you think students should be reading at a frustrational text? And then if you add all those up, it needs to total 100. So I'll give you a minute to just look at that, and I'll show you the next slide. The next slide is showing us that 85% of the time should be spent on at an instructional level, which again is that independent level, at that independent reading during the day, but that's also what they're doing when they're at home with you, that independent reading when they're reading on their own. They might be reading text instructionally during school time, and then a book that would be frustrational level for your child, those are the books that you can choose to read to them. Because then there's still great books, there's still lots of great vocabulary that students are going to learn by being read to. That's really important that we continue that all the way through, or even into middle school and high school, that we're still reading to and with our children. And now we're ready for Mrs. Winkler.
Reading, if you go back to the chart that Mrs. Caballero talked about, is the biggest piece of the pie. It's the reading that the children choose to do on their own. And it's not the same as the dear time, that drop everything and read, or the sustained silent reading that we had when we were in school, where everything stopped and everyone read. The teacher is very active during the independent time, because at the elementary level, independent is measured on a gradient. Think about when your children learn to eat. You didn't independently teach them to eat by handing them a steak and a knife and say, go at it. We don't do that with independent reading here either. We really kind of check in with the students and provide accountability to make sure that they are reading, help them make those good book choices so that they can spend their time reading. The IDR is one component of the reading workshop, but it's monitored through teacher conferences with the students about what they are reading. The students are given the opportunity to respond. That would be that small piece of the pie in the graph where they get to share text. That's the time that becomes more like adult reading, where you share with your friends what you're reading, why you liked it, what you should read next. That goes back to that excitement about books and how to motivate students to read more. That few minutes of talk about text enhances the students' reading and their thinking about books and their motivation to read more. Time spent reading contributes greater to reading achievement in a way that other activities do not. So, reading is really a cycle, okay? And it begins with increased time spent reading. In order to read, you need to give the students time to read. If they spend time reading, they're going to increase their sight word foundation and their phonics skills. There's about 220 words that make up about 80% of the books students will read from kindergarten through 3rd grade. And about 50% of those words are common even in adult writing. So practicing those sight words, those words that they need to know, like when, then, the, a, those are the words that you'll typically find in a children's book. And at the beginning of this, they really need practice increasing that sight word foundation. Once words start to become automatic, it frees up that memory space so that students can then concentrate on the meaning of what is happening in their books. The better students attend to the meaning, then they're comprehending their books. Once comprehension is in place, then they can work on fluency. That's sounding and showing of meaning while they read. The better students understand, the more fluently they'll read. The more fluently they'll read, the better they understand. And the cycle continues. Now the cycle doesn't just go around and around, it also goes up as the level of text for each student increases. The importance of the independent daily reading builds background knowledge for students. More background knowledge they have, the greater their comprehension will be. It improves their vocabulary. It's especially true of readers that for 3rd grade and up. They mostly come upon words that aren't in their speaking or their listening vocabulary inside the books that they read. It enhances literary language structures, that storybook language, once upon a time, right? Happily ever after. Those things that aren't in the way that we speak, but children learn those story languages in the text that they read. Daily independent reading gives students time to enhance practicing the skills and the strategies that we teach them. Our goals are to have the students read proficiently through texts on their own. And again, that's on the gradient as they get ready for that. Independent reading time also helps children fall in love with books by providing them those diverse classroom libraries that we've worked so hard to build, filled with all of the different genres. Some of our students love to read nonfiction, some love fantasy, and we need to provide options for all of our students. And opportunities to share and discuss with classmates is also super important. So that's the elementary reading level for independent reading. We'll go to middle school and what they do to foster.
Thank you. So I'm Melissa Conlon. I teach 6th grade at Annan. So as the kids come into 6th grade, they're all coming from 4 different elementary schools. So it's not just a time to promote reading. They also have to get to know each other, feel comfortable in a new environment. So there's a lot happening as the kids come into WAMS. So to kick off the year, we kind of try to make reading just a part of how the kids get to know each other. They're not just getting to know, what did you do this summer, what's your favorite food. We just make books part of that language. So something that I do at the beginning of the year, we have posters around the room. So kids will grab a marker and there's different questions on the posters. Some of the posters might say, what'd you do this summer? Or how many siblings do you have? Things like that. They'll talk in those corners, getting to know new students, which is great. But we see some questions about reading in that activity. So your favorite reading memories or places to read. Why does reading matter? We have some very enlightening comments, like it's a way to self-discovery, someone wrote this year. What makes a good reader? So some kids say, you know, the fluency aspect, but other ones said reading different types of books. So it's kind of good even for those kids who maybe don't consider themselves readers. They're getting these amazing ideas from those kids that do come in as considering themselves readers. We also like to use picture books at the beginning of the year. I know 8th grade does this just as much as 6th grade, but kids get so excited when I take out a picture book. You can actually hear it in the classroom. Oh yes, we're reading! So we don't want that excitement to go away, even as they come to WAMS. One book we did at the beginning of this year was the Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore, and it has an extensive vocabulary for the kids to hear. It also kind of sends the message of everyone's story matters. As they're coming to middle school, that sense of I need to belong is so pertinent. So having a story that sends that message to them on the first week of school, I think is a great way to start the year. And even books that maybe are a little simpler, The Girl Who Never Made Mistakes, just having kids just feel comfortable in their environment, but also incorporating reading at the same time. Also in 6th grade, we have an amazing media center with lots of activities and lots of books. And one of the problems we had discussed was that idea of accessibility. So within the first 2 weeks of school, we as English teachers bring our classes down to the media center to see where certain genres are, to kind of get used to, there's different stickers on the different genre books. How to even check out a book because they're nervous. Sometimes they'll go in there, they'll see a book they like, but they don't want to ask anyone how to take it out. So we make that very direct, so it's crystal clear that you guys are welcome to take out books, as many as you want. We show them how to take out books online, so if they forget a book at home, they can find that text online and read it online. It just kind of creates the idea of this is an open door. You guys are welcome to the media center. We want you using it. It's a safe place for you. Something that Ms. Crandon, who's not here, and I do, we have the kids also at the beginning of the year create a reader's profile. So who are you as a reader? And it's something that a lot of kids haven't really thought about. In 8th grade, Ms. Crandon does one that looks like this. She makes her own to show the kids kind of what it looks like and who she is as a reader. So she put what genres she likes to read, and even genres that she doesn't like, having the kids think about, you know what, that one, I don't really consider myself someone who reads fantasy or things like that. And then even adding these things to the Reader's Profile project. When do you like to read? Where do you like to read? Are you an emotional reader? She said she likes the smell of books. It just kind of makes the kids realize it doesn't have to be this scary, daunting thing. You guys have identities as readers. And then in 6th grade, we do one also. It's a little more artsy, I guess, for the 6th graders coming in. And same as Ms. Crandon, I make my own Reader's Profile. I want my kids to see that I am a reader too. I'm not just telling you to read, I'm also going to be a reader. Because I think you all know that sometimes kids don't exactly do what you say, but they'll do what you do. Including things like I had a picture of me as a baby reading with my dad on Christmas Eve. And the kids get excited to see that. Or my dog sitting on my lap as I was reading a book. Putting in books they want to read for the year. And just kind of defining who they are as readers and what they like about reading. And here is a student one as well. And it's really cute for them to bring in pictures. They're excited to do that. Oh, I have a baby picture of me reading with my mom. All right, so once we kick off the year, we get into the reading workshop. And at the middle school, we do a combination of full class texts and independent texts. So we'll read Wonder at the beginning of the year. And we use that book as kind of a community builder. So they're all reading the same text. They can all talk about that story together. And it's a good way to have direct instruction with the same text. So let's learn how to identify character traits. Let's make sure we know how to monitor and clarify. When we're confused, we need to make sure we reread. So with those full class texts, we create community, but then it's also great when the kids have that time to pick their own book and then apply those skills that we did together in the full class book to their own book. So we read Wonder, we learned about identifying character traits. In your own book today, I want you to find 2 character traits. And that's the idea that many have said, that kids want to be, we want to make sure they're reading on an independent, proficient level. So it's not just me telling you the answer, like, oh, the character trait in Wonder is this. Now they have to do it on their own in a new text. We continue using picture books in reading workshop. In 8th grade, they use Alabama Spitfire to give some background knowledge on Harper Lee before reading To Kill a Mockingbird. And in 6th grade, we read A Wrinkle in Time, and as an introduction to the sci-fi genre, we do Interstellar Cinderella, kind of a remake, and kind of use it to identify what makes a story sci-fi. And it's also it's told in poetry, so again, to pick out some of those elements as well. Also throughout the year in reading workshop, we want to make sure we're recommending books to kids. Sometimes they don't know what they want to read. This is a picture of my class library, which we've kind of tied into the curriculum this year, which has been great. I try to do a book talk as often as I can, just recommending new titles. And we also, back to school night this year, I had parents write book recommendations for the kids. And parents looked at me very afraid because they weren't sure what to write, so I helped them out a little bit. But kids were so excited to come into school the next day and see these recommendations from their parents, or, oh, that's my friend's mom, she said to read The Hunger Games. You'd be surprised how excited they get to see something like that. And Ms. Crandon, on her email signatures, she always has what she's currently reading as part of her signature. It just makes it part of the culture. You kind of expect that from Ms. Crandon, and we're just spreading what we're reading to make it a natural thing for our students. We also have the kids recommend books. I use something called Padlet. There's a link on my website where kids can leave a recommendation for a book. And then other kids can rate the book if they've also read it, or leave a comment if they agree or disagree, and that grows every week. In addition to the online resource, we also have a binder of recommendations in the classroom, so a hard copy. And then students can also leave book talks. So if instead of me recommending a book that week, maybe a student would like to suggest a book to their classmates, and they're welcome to do that. And like the elementary school teachers were saying, during reading independent reading. It's not just, you know, dear, drop everything, everyone sit quietly. We do the conferences, and conferencing in middle school, yes, we're doing skills, but it's also an opportunity to just monitor their reading life. So you can kind of say, oh, you know, buddy, you've been on this book for 2 weeks. What can I do to help you pick it up more? Are you interested in a different book? Just kind of getting them to feel like real readers. And it's also a time to teach those strategies. So if they're having trouble summarizing, you can sit with a certain student or group of students to practice that specific skill. And it's also a great opportunity, say a kid's been reading graphic novels for 3 weeks, which I'm never going to tell a kid they can't read a graphic novel, but if you want to challenge them to that next step, oh, here's another book that looks like it would be a good fit for you. And they're excited. They're like, ooh, my teacher thinks I can read that book.